Thank you for joining Sports Development Series. We yours truly, Boma, Ekiyor.
SportDev series. Yeah, I know it's been a while. Listen, guys, thanks for, tuning in this time. Been dealing with a bunch of stuff. I think trying to get some players signed, traveling. That's eaten up a bit of my time, but I'm back. And today, interestingly enough, I kind of wanted to talk about club spending and success. I've been following all the leagues, as most of you have, and looking at teams and successes and what they've been doing. There just seems to be a disconnect. I'm sorry. There was a time I used to think the more clubs spend, the more success they get. And that's worked to a certain degree, right? You look at Manchester City over the last couple of years, spent a ton of money and won titles, Champions League, pretty much have won everything. But you have to ask yourself a question. Is that the only reason why they were successful? You know what I mean? Did they do something else? Was there another reason? Pep, maybe? I don't know. Here's the interesting thing. When you look at the last 5 years, and you look at clubs have been extremely active in the transfer market, right? So I pulled up a little research done by, C's Football Observatory. And they posted something interesting. In the last 5 years, you realize that in terms of activity in the transfer market and spending, guess who's number one? Chelsea, right? Chelsea's number one by far. And they've been active with approximately 2.5 billion euros. And then, of course, followed by City with 1.7 billion euros, and then PSG with 1.4 billion euros. But if you look at that in the last 5 years, and you look at Chelsea in the last 5 years, what do you see? Clearly that spending hasn't reflected on the field. I should know. I'm a Chelsea fan. But it's not. And if you look at the top 5 most active clubs in the transfer market over the last 5 years, I think Chelsea's number one. Then you have City, PSG, Barca, United, and Juve. And then you have Tottenham. We know Tottenham hasn't won anything, so they don't even factor in. So I found myself asking the question, what is that formula? What makes these clubs successful? It clearly isn't the spending. Because if you look at all these clubs, I don't think any of them have won Champions League in the last 3 to 4 years, right? Maybe Chelsea has come close. City did win, so they're an exception. But all the other clubs, and if you look at the list all the way down to 20, the clubs that have been the most active and have spent the most money, it doesn't always translate into victories. So I started thinking of teams that have kind of had dynasties where they just won everything and went on this ridiculous period of where they seemed invincible. And you think of, Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson, and the transfer market wasn't what it was, right? The players he had, it almost seemed like they left their ego at the door the minute they came into that club. So they were more like individuals that fit into a system. They didn't come in and say, hey, I'm the individual and I'm making this team. That just wasn't the case with Manchester United at that time. And when you look at them, they won everything. Impossible to beat. Competed extremely well. And did everything they could possibly do. So you realize that there was a culture at United, right? There was a philosophy, a culture that they all believed in, and they followed that, and they won tons of games. They had talented players, right? It's not like they didn't have good players. They did. They had talented players, but there was something else, right? And you couldn't quantify it. You couldn't use money to put a finger on it. And I'll use even Chelsea. Yes, Abramovich buys the club. Mourinho comes in. They win. But it wasn't because Abramovich just bought the club that they won. Yes, he helped. He bought some really good players. Balak, Essien. But at the same time, they also had got a coach, a new coach, young, confident, had his own belief, his own philosophy, had a press conference and called himself the special one, right? So he comes in and he puts his culture. He just won Champions League with Porto. So he comes and puts his culture into that club. And boom, the secret sauce was created. They won endless. And as a matter of fact, that was a transformation of that club where they went on this whole period of being a really top club in Europe. So I look at this spending and I look at everything else, and I take a look at even some clubs that I've personally talked to in my quest to try to get players jobs, and you listen to them and they're always looking for the big players that have gone to one club that are pretty big and they want to buy them and do all these things. But they miss out on something else. A lot of them do. And a lot of times when you talk to certain clubs, depending on how they behave, you can easily tell which ones are going to be more successful and which ones aren't. Some of them have a system and a culture they believe in, and they get the players in, and you can see the success, and some don't. So it's an interesting thing. I think next time you watch a lot of these teams, they have the so-called big names. They might buy a player 3-4 years. He's not there anymore. Right? And they go through players. There's a revolving door of guys that come in and come out. And so they never really have a system or a culture built. There's nothing concrete. Hell, they even change owners sometimes very quickly. So I think next time it's kind of conclude here. I think next time you watch a game and you see all these superstars on the team, it's important to remember that the spending doesn't always reflect the success. And having an owner with big pockets doesn't always mean your team will win the next Champions League. All right, guys. Hey, listen, thank you so much. I will come out with one each week, I promise. But that's all I have for today. All right. SportDev series. Take care. If you tuned into this, I love you and be blessed. 1.